think that,
If only that were true.
I think that's just a background. Okay, well, let's get started.
Well, bear with me a moment. I'm trying to close everything else on my computer so that I don't get any interference anywhere.
And Mike, I've already got it where you can go ahead and take over the screen when you're ready too.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hang on one
Hi,
second.
Marianne.
Hi. Yeah, we're gonna-
Well, I think we should wait till 1:30 to start and see if there's any public comment.
Okay.
Okay.
There's nobody
Just-
so far.
I know, just to be
Official.
official.
Official. All right. I'm back and the dog is gone.
And Teresa, I'll see you on Monday, right?
That's right. Great. And I'll have everything ready anytime after 11, Robert. You can
Okay.
come. So I have payables to sign and payroll.
Okay.
Do we have this whole banner app ready so we don't have to do this stuff anymore?
No, you know what we're going to do, Marianne, is next week at our regular finance,
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to get the bank person in on our Zoom with us because
Okay.
they're the ones who can step you through it better than I can because I'm new to it too. So my goal is to have that person in our finance meeting and you guys with your phones, they can answer any of the questions you have and get you guys all set up. So hopefully
Let me-
another couple weeks.
Let me make a suggestion, okay?
Sure.
That you do that Wednesday night at the board meeting because there are other potential check signers.
Yeah,
Like Debbie.
there are. that
Debbie.
They would need, well, I mean, I would have them just come in and like sign checks if they don't have the permissions and all that, but we can have every signer be able to do that. So,
Well, when I was reading up on the banner thing, it said that I was going to be the administrator and I had the ability to make, add and withdraw other signatories as needed.
right.
So that should be possible. We asked that question at the meeting then and get that all taken care of.
Okay. Yeah,
Well-
good point.
Yeah, just so that, I thought you could do it just once, but that's fine. We could do it at the finance meeting, and then you can maybe arrange for individuals to, you can have discussion with them about that.
And then hopefully I won't need the bank person at the board meeting since we'll know how to do it already. We'll have everything set up and we can just go through it with them on their phones. So,
Okay,
yeah,
great.
okay, well, I'll figure it out. We'll make sure it goes.
All right, so let's get started.
Yep, 1:30.
All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. So as a point of introduction, again, my name is Mike Zizzi. I'm a partner with the CPA firm of Leaf and Cole. We conducted the audit this year of the Duluth Community Services District. As a point of presentation, as I typically do, I'm going to run through fairly lengthy the independent auditor's report, and then I'm going to also run through the cash flow statement. I do that for two reasons. Number one, there's certain communications that are required. And so by going through the independent auditor's report, we cover all of those required communications. And then I try to present to you the cash flow statement because I think that ultimately pretty much everything runs through cash at some point or another. So we capture it all, but it gives you an awful lot of information in a brief amount of time. So without further ado, the independent auditor's report begins on page 1. And I'm going to run through that kind of paragraph by paragraph. And so the first paragraph, see if I can get this to work. There we go. Okay. So the first paragraph indicates what was it that we audited? Well, we audited the statement of net position, the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position, the statement of cash flows that we're going to go through, and the notes to the financial statements. In layman's terms, that's a balance sheet, an income statement, and a statement of cash flows. The second paragraph indicates that management is responsible. Again, management is responsible for the preparation and the fair presentation of the financial statements. That includes the design, the implementation, and the maintenance of internal controls. The third paragraph tells you that my responsibility as the auditor is to express an opinion based on our audit. So these 2 pages that I'm going through here is my part of the financial statements. Everything else belongs to the district. That same paragraph also tells you the auditing standards that we followed. We followed auditing standards that are generally accepted in the United States. This year, we also followed standards applicable to financial audits containing government auditing standards, and that's because we had a fair amount of federal financial assistance, and so we were required to conduct a single audit on that federal financial assistance. And as a California special district, you're subject to the state controller's minimum audit requirements for California special districts. That same paragraph also stresses the concept of reasonable assurance. So again, we're not giving absolute assurance, we're giving reasonable assurance. And we're not saying that your financial statements are perfect, we're saying that they're not materially misstated. The next paragraph tries to define what an audit is. It is procedures that are performed to obtain audit evidence. Those procedures are selected by us as the auditors, and it's based upon our risk assessment. In doing that risk assessment, we consider your internal controls. We also evaluate the accounting principles and any estimates that are used. So as I tell you every year, your audit is a little bit different than everybody else's audit because you're you. You process information the way that you process it, and so we adapt our procedures. We tailor them to whatever the situation is in any given environment. The last paragraph on page 1 just states affirmatively that we believe that we have in fact obtained audit evidence that is sufficient, it's appropriate, and does provide a basis for our opinion. So we now turn to page 2, and the top of that is the opinion paragraph, which states what we all wanted to hear, which is that the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects, and that they are in conformity with accounting principles that are generally accepted in the United States. The 7th paragraph references to some required supplementary information that's required by generally accepted accounting principles. Now that includes management's discussion and analysis, which preceded the actual financial statements in the document that you have. And then in the back, there's some required supplementary information related to your pension plan. So that's the proportionate share of net pension liability and the schedules of contributions to the pension plan. While the MD&A does contain information that is derived principally from the financial statements, there is a little bit of analysis in there that you wouldn't find from just reading the financial statement. So if you don't do anything else, at least make sure that everybody reads the management's discussion and analysis. And then we already talked about the fact that we had a single audit, so I don't have a slide on paragraphs 8 through 10, but as I indicated, because the district earned more than $750,000 in federal financial assistance, a single audit was required. For reporting purposes, that includes the schedule of federal financial assistance, which is on page 35. In addition, there's 2 additional reports that are presented regarding our testing of both internal controls and compliance with laws and regulations. The first report is at the financial statement level, and the second report is focused specifically on that federal financial assistance, or the federal dollars that are spent. And we're pleased to report that we didn't have any findings or question costs in either report. Now I'm going to turn to the cash flow statement. That's on pages 12 and 13. And I run through that kind of bottom to top. I'm going to focus on page 12. And so at the bottom of page 12, you'll see where we can find our cash and cash equivalents on the statement of financial position or the balance sheet. So we had 6.2 million in unrestricted cash and 96,000 in restricted cash. So that's how that bridges back to the statement of financial position, or the in layman's terms, the balance sheet. So that's a total of 6.3 million. So if we work our way up the page on page 12, you'll see that in bold there is cash and cash equivalents at the end of the year. It's that same 6.3 number. The number above that is the prior year number of 6.9 million. So we had a decrease in our cash of $592,000. So as I just said, our cash and cash equivalents decreased 592,487. That's compared to an increase of 108,121 in the prior year, or a difference of approximately $700,000. The difference principally results from our expenses increasing by 1.3 million from the prior year. Again, that's almost all related to disaster-related expenses. I'm sure that's no surprise. But we only received $430,000 in federal financial assistance thus far. So again, keep in mind that this statement is based on cash. So it's cash in, cash out. So even though we had $1.9 million in disaster expenses, we've got a $1.5 million receivable sitting on the books at the end of June, waiting to receive that federal financial assistance that we expect to get. In addition, we spent $95,000 less on capital assets in the current year, and our accounts payable increased by $70,000 as well. So we spent less on capital because most of what we did we expensed, and we're a little bit slower on paying our accounts payable. Again, principally because I'm assuming that much of that is related to the disaster-related expenses, so we have more of those. So if your accounts payable goes up, that's considered an increase in cash because our base point starts with net income. So we're adjusting net income each time based upon the effects to cash. So again, moving up, turning back to page 12, we had 151,000 in interest or investment income this year. This slide doesn't change much year to year. The lion's share of any interest that we earn is always earned in LAIF. We earn a small amount in the sheriff's account, a small amount in our operating checking, but it totals to the 151,203 that we actually receive. Our receipt of deposits, here's the balances in the deposits. So we continue to hold that deposit on the Via Santa Rosa project of 20,400. I can't tell you how many years we've been sitting on that. But in addition, we also have permit and utility deposits, and those fluctuate from year to year. And so this year, our utility deposits increased 12,000, but our permit deposits went down 2,800. So the net increase to cash was the $9,200 that we find on page 12. Next, we have the capital lease on the building. So we paid $14,322 in interest, and we paid $39,628 in principal. We pay roughly the same amount, the $53,950 in total every year. And just like the mortgage on your house, every year we pay a little more principal and a little less interest. Next, we had our acquisition of capital assets, as I indicated. That was much smaller this year than it had been in the previous year. And so we had upgrades to our IT cloud software that's what we spent our money on this year. So anything that was, road related or culvert related or anything like that was considered a repair. And so that was expense. We had the proceeds from the disaster revenue of $429,000. So that is the federal money that we received in the current year. That's our disaster assistance. $339,283 of that is federal, $82,151 is state, and then there's another $83,058 that they gave us to cover administrative cost purposes. The next section is the operating section, and so we spent $1.1 million in operations, and again, this is where all of the repairs expenses reside. So again, 1.1 million in the current year, compared to a positive cash flow of 148,000 in the prior year. That's a difference of about $1.25 million. Again, not surprising based on the level of disaster-related expenses that's included in the PO work. Our disaster-related expenses, as I already said, exceeded 1.9 million, and we're anticipated to be reimbursed at 75% by FEMA. And then 75% of the remaining 25% comes from the California Office of Emergency Services. And so it's not 100% reimbursement. but it's a fairly high percentage. So we're again anticipating a receivable in the neighborhood of about 1.5 million as of June 30th. That's what I had planned for you this afternoon. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to address those at this time.
One of the questions I had really related to the notes, and in the past, we had talked about some issues with just being able to validate and verify. But we're a small organization. I think you cited us in the past for that.
I'm not clear on exactly what you're addressing.
Let me find it here and I'll tell you.
Okay.
This is internal controls.
Internal control, that's it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't anything in the current year that was any different than anything in a prior year. I mean, for the most part, you're a small organization, and so you're fairly limited in what you can do. And that's the generalization of the conversation that we've had in the past.
I think in the past it was pointed out as something management should correct, but you didn't do that this year.
I didn't readdress that issue. No, I did not.
Okay, good. I'm glad you didn't, but I guess it's, but things haven't changed. So what you said a few years ago is still.
It would still be valid, but yeah, I'm not, again, my job is to raise the issue, and if there was a significant turnover on this committee, then I might raise that issue again. Again, just from a clarity standpoint. I mean, again, it's my job to raise the issues, your job to decide whether or not the cost benefit is there. But I'm not gonna sit here and browbeat you year over year. Every once in a while, I need to throw those letters out so that I can point to it if somebody says, why didn't you tell us?
If I could say one thing, a few years ago when you did mention that, the one thing that has changed is we no longer have signers. Rob was a signer, Cher was a signer.
Mm-hmm.
Now all the signing is being done by you folks. So, I mean, I think that was one of the things that they talked about. So,
yeah, absolutely. And making sure that somebody else is looking at it.
Yeah.
The basic premise, and this is kind of what we talked about, is that if Teresa is responsible for the records that keep track of the cash, then you don't want her to have access to the cash.
Right.
So she shouldn't be the one who's, it's one thing to prepare the checks, but to need somebody else to sign it is an important function.
Right.
One other thing we added is insurance. You could call it a bond, but we now have $1 million fidelity coverage as part of our insurance package through an insurance company. I believe it's got a $25,000 deductible. I think I saw it mentioned in here somewhere.
Yes, it is mentioned in there.
But that's another thing that has been done probably since the year that you had that notation and recommended we take some corrective action, and that was one additional thing also. So the underlying $1 million in cash of the district sitting mostly, well, that would cover most everything plus some in Banner Bank, is insured. So should something occur where those funds disappear, we do have an insurer that would have to step up to the plate and reimburse us for that.
The other thing I noticed, and I can't exactly find it now, but is that it appeared to me that our benefit fees were less this year than last year.
The only thing that I could, a reason for that is every year we're losing we are losing acreage to exempt people that were exempt in the past, like Rancho Water, Fish and Game. None of those things can be placed on the tax rolls. So I have to internally bill for those. And when I find out every year when I go through the process of doing the assessment, that's when those properties pop up. So then the next year I have to bill for those. So there was about 9 properties that were taken over, I think, by Fish and Game. And as you know, Fish and Game isn't paying us either. We're still billing them, but they're not paying it. But it's too small of an amount for us to kind of do anything legally right now. So, you know, that could be a reason why there's a drop. But it will be caught up. In fact, I'm getting ready to do all the billing now for all the exempt parcels. So, I mean, that's one reason I can off the top of my head.
And what we've done there is that we continue to book the revenue and book the receivable, but then we realize that the collectability of that is somewhat questionable.
Mhm.
And so then we've created an allowance against it, which reduces our revenue. So net, it doesn't show up in revenue, but we're still tracking it and making efforts to collect it. So if we do collect it, then the allowance would come off and our revenue would spike at that point.
Okay. Okay. Now, you mentioned that you have an expectation for the amount of disaster funds we're going to receive.
Correct. That's sitting on the statement of financial position.
Right, and I guess this is to Jim. That amount, how firm is that amount, Jim? Is that really the amount we expect to receive, or is that potentially less?
I need to verify, we've got, this is a 3-person answer, I suspect. I know during the course of the audit, we provided information in terms of agreements that we have with FEMA. And I'm assuming that the numbers that actually appear in this report, Mike, are the obligated amounts where we have essentially a signed contract with FEMA. Is that what created the 1.9, the exact number that's in here? Or Teresa will know.
Yes, I sent those documents as part of, you know, when they were doing the audit. We do have paperwork that says their cumulative monies that they have already obligated to us is 1.9 something. And as you heard, Mike, we've collected 444,000, something like that of it. So yes, we do have documents that state this is your minimum obligation. That's not including any of the soft costs that we're trying to get recouped and all of that. That is just the bare bones of what they've obligated us. And as you know, it's taking forever to collect. But
the number that Mike and his team have put into this report, that 1.9 million, actually comes from those obligated amounts, because obligated in federal FEMA terms is about as close to a contract as you're going to get. Is that true, Teresa? That's the
yes, yes.
There's a lot of numbers floating around here.
Right.
Yeah, because the number was derived from 1.9 million of costs, and that's when I indicate that then FEMA's obligation is 75% of that. OES's obligation is 75% of the remaining 25%, and then there are the amounts that they give you for administrative or soft costs can vary depending upon the size and the number of the DSRs that you've submitted.
And that's not, those soft costs aren't reflected in this report, if I were.
Correct.
So in other words,
the receivable we've booked is based upon just the 75 and the 75 of the 25.
Right.
so that's probably about as close to a contract as you're going to get from FEMA. And then these soft costs next year, Well, for example, I believe once the project is completely finished, and we know that as of this moment, the project on the expense side is 1.9 million. When we're ready to close everything out, Teresa, isn't it 5%?
Yes,
We can bill
5%, yes,
them administrative costs,
up to.
5% of the project. So that would be almost $100,000 at 1.9 million.
You would say up to, I mean, you got to prove that you have that amount of cost by submitting timesheets and everything else. So it's a maximum of.
We'll be somewhere up there in the 50 to 90,000 range.
Yeah.
Which is not reflected in this report. And then Teresa, about how much more above 1.9 are we pushing paperwork through for more money right now? Roughly.
We're 1.9. We're at about 2.5, somewhere around that area.
So there's another 500,000 that's in the works right now, that's not reflected in this report, that next year would be a positive in the financial statement. But it's not money in hand yet. You know, we're basically trying to convince FEMA that they should give us this extra money for, you know, these soft costs that we have. And whether they do or don't, we don't know, but I would guess that we'll probably get half of it, somewhere in there, plus our admin. So you're looking at reimbursement for 1.9 coming in this current year, or minus the 400 they've already paid, plus probably another 300-400 in soft costs that aren't reflected in the current report. So we should have a good, I guess the bottom line is, our financial statement as it relates to FEMA in the coming year should look very positive.
Okay.
One other thing that I wanted to point out to you on page 29 is the footnote on other post-employment benefits. And so in the past, we've disclosed that you didn't provide post-employment benefits, but effective with your MOU that went into effect on July 1 of 2019, which is the year of this financial statement, we've begun providing benefits to retirees. Now, because of the way that these disclosures are made, and with the liabilities being actuarially determined, the actuaries need basically 2 years to figure all that stuff out to get the liability established. And so I consulted with the actuaries to make sure that that was accurate. And so as of June 30th, our liability was 0 because we weren't offering it until the next day.
Okay.
And only to retirees retiring on or after that date. And so I've spoken with Teresa and shared with her the contact information of the actuary that I spoke with. The actuary that you use to calculate your pension disclosures, they have 2 different teams. And so one team does the pension disclosures and an entirely different team does the OPEB disclosures. And so I spoke with the people on their OPEB disclosure team and have put Teresa in touch with them so that they can make sure that we have all of the actuarial reports that we need next year in order to make appropriate disclosures.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to take note of too is from my calculations, I'm showing that our unfunded liability on our pension increased about $53,000 in that year. So we have about a 1.179, something like that, $1 million pension liability. And also, we're not only paying the liability on the regular pension, but the PEPRA people, the new people like Jim and Dustin and Jessica, they are now accruing an unfunded liability. So it's very small, but both levels now are have unfunded liabilities. Of course, the original one is, you know, very large, but we are starting to get one on the PEPRA as well.
Is that based on, excuse me, Teresa, is that based on fiscal year end June 30th? As I
Yeah.
could imagine, you know, the financial situation on that unfunded liability is somewhat different right now.
Yeah, that is
It
at the
approved. Yeah,
June of last year. Yeah.
that
Now,
should have improved.
even the disclosures in the financial statements are further back than that. If
Okay.
you look at, again, it's part of note 1. Bear with me.
28.
Well, let's. I was gonna go to the bottom of page 17.
17.
And so again, these are the dates that the actuaries use, and that's what I was alluding to when I was talking about the OPEB. OPEB is going to follow similar dating. So for this year's disclosures, the valuation date was June 30th, 18, but the measurement date was June 30th, 19. So the measurement date is trailing us by a year. So when we're looking at the footnote, or even, you know, more the summary of the non-current liabilities, I think that's the easier place to see it on page, and that's what Teresa was alluding to. At the bottom of page 22 is where you see the roll forward of your net pension liability. And so, so the expense was 219,000, but and I've got my fingers in the air saying the funding of it was 165,000. So it grew by the difference between those two numbers. So the expense was outpacing the funding. Now, again, a lot of this is all actuarially driven, and there's you know, there's certain calculations that go into that pertain to other people in your pool when you start talking about your share of, because they take the pool of the investments, they take the pool of the liability, and so there's certain proportions that go into that. So depending upon the growth in your district versus the growth of other entities within that pool, your share of that liability can change. And it doesn't change anything from a funding standpoint. You know, they're requiring you to fund it so that you have a sufficient amount of money on hand when you need it.
I had heard about the PEPRA unfunded liability from another source. I don't remember, it was a few months ago. And quite frankly, I was shocked because supposedly CalPERS was going to get their act together. They created PEPRA, and it was supposed to have taken care of all these problems. And now here we go again. Mm. So just as a taxpayer of California, it bothers me that you know, we keep being lied to every decade by these PERS people. This wasn't supposed to happen, as I understand it. I'm not talking as you know, a Duluth person or a person that's, you know, getting a retirement someday out of this system. It's just, you know, you sit in these conferences and they tell you how wonderful they're doing, and then, you know, you open the mail and they're creating it again. And the unfunded liability on the old, you know, statewide, you know, is enough to break the state easily. And now they've supposedly reformed and cleaned up their act in 2012, and here we are again. So I don't know, somewhat disturbing. And I guess as long as everything works perfect, everybody's going to get their pension and all this, some kind of hocus pocus. But if anything goes wrong,
yeah,
I don't know.
It's frightening.
And so here, you know, if you look at it like on a personal basis, people say like me, So I got kicked out of the system because I was too long, so I've got an old pension. And then I come back and I accept employment with a lesser pension than the people sitting next to me all day long.
Mhm.
Because supposedly that's gonna guarantee that my pensions are gonna pay someday, because now they're funding it properly. And then, so you do that, and you know, do your employment contract, and you agree to accept lower benefits and all this, and then you accidentally open the mail from PERS to your employer and find out there's no, it's in jeopardy too. I don't know, it just, it's just like, when is this gonna end? And then, now let's jump back, okay, now I'm not an employee, I'm a manager of this operation. So now we're telling the public, on our financial statement, that they are potentially liable for 1.9 million. And back in 2012, I'm sure they were scratching their head as taxpayers saying, how the hell did we get in this mess? And sure hope we don't have to pay that someday. And then they say, oh, well, but we've got Pepper now, it's all gonna get better. So we're gonna drag that 2012 liability and see if someday maybe we can pay that off. But we're never doing that again, and here we are less than 10 years later, and we're doing it again. And and when these financial statements tell the taxpayer, they're double on the hook again. It's crazy. Anyway, enough of my soapbox.
Well, on a brighter note, which is, I don't know why I'm so happy, but our building will be paid off in 2025.
Yeah. Well,
We owe like 210,000 right now.
I was thinking about that, Teresa. I know we took out that loan, about 10 years ago or something like that?
Yeah, well, it was a 15-year loan.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm just wondering, what interest rates are we paying on it? I mean, I know we only have 4 years to go, but if we're paying 7-8%, you know, perhaps we could still take out the same amount of loan and drive it way down with a 5-year loan or something.
That's probably because you saw in this last audit period, we paid like $17,000 in interest for, it's somewhere along that lines, and I do not know what the rate is, but yeah, it's possible we could do that.
I was just when I was looking, I think I saw 14,000 in interest when I was just
okay. Yeah, that's probably it. Yeah.
So it's in the overall scheme, it's peanuts and it's almost paid off, but you could save considerable amount of money by just getting a 5-year loan at 2% or less.
Yeah, it's something we could check into. You know what? I'll check into that, Marianne.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, not to mention that the other option is to actually kick it back out. Like a lot of homeowners will do that, where they'll, from a cash flow standpoint, you kick it back out to a 30-year loan and cut your payment down to next to nothing.
Yeah,
that's true.
Pay with future dollars.
Okay.
That is another option available to you.
Yeah.
All right. Good.
Or paying the whole thing off.
That's what, that was my thought. Let's just get rid of it.
Yeah. Well, when you're paying that kind of interest, and you don't want to switch that, then, pay it off. But, money is so cheap right now that it seems to me that we could better utilize it by I don't even know what we invest in, but it just seems like it would be such a small outlay compared to what we have right now, that it would be worth, refinancing it one way or the other.
Except that we get like less than 1%.
Yeah, we're at about like 0.45.
That's right. So whatever we pay out is more than what we could potentially earn.
Right. So perhaps the way to go is to just to refinance for another 5 years or whatever, and just lower our cost.
Yep. Okay, we'll check it out.
Or the possibility of just paying it off how much is it, Teresa? We were looking at
210.
the wheels.
Not very much.
We'd probably be better off investing in ourselves and get it off and be done with it, which raises the cash flow a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. That was
And, so we make less than 0.5% in interest, yet we're probably paying 3 or 4, as I remember.
Okay, well, I'll check out some different things, and maybe at finance I'll have some more information for you guys.
Yeah, it could be, like you said, different scenarios, but it just seems like, paying that kind of interest rate now for either 4 years or whatever, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question for Teresa, going back to the PERS soapbox. You and I met and went over these a couple days ago, and somewhere in here, and I can't find it, is how much the unfunded liability that we pay every month. So when like Robert comes in and signs payroll checks, essentially he signs a check for like the 6 people that we have here. Another check to PERS, and that's unfunded liability. And if I remember right, it's like $9,000 per month.
I think it's 8,600, yes, per month. And now the PEPRA one is $229 a month. So it's very small, but we're paying on both now every month.
So with this unfunded liability, that's like one high-paid employee.
I know, it's a lot.
Every month. And PERS says if we pay that, the world will be fine. I don't know. But again, we already went down this road a year ago.
But you know what? Every year that UAL payment goes up about $1,000 a month. So, a couple years ago it was like $6,100. So every year it'll increase.
Yeah, we pay 2 employees a pension every month. For what we pay that back to PERS, I mean, that $9,000 a month, that's a lot of money.
Yes, it is.
We can talk about it, but
You're right.
I mean, it is what it is. If we had this discussion a long time ago, years ago, didn't get anywhere. Then we had it more recently and didn't get anywhere.
Yeah. Sorry I brought it up.
Somebody have a phone on?
Yeah, I'm sorry. That was,
Oh, okay, all right. I thought
that
it
was
was
mine.
me.
I
I was
just-
looking around on my desk.
Yeah, me too. It was like, did I do that?
it's just spam.
Oh, well, that's important.
Yeah. I got too many electronic devices here. Okay, any other questions? Anything else? Mike, thank you very much. I think that was very clear. And we look forward to your next presentation at the board meeting.
Okay, very good. I look forward to seeing you then.
Now,
Thank you, Mike.
before you go off, wait a minute. Before you go off, I'd like Jim and Teresa, you to go off, and I'd like Mike to stay and Mary Ann to stay.
Okay.
Teresa or Jessica?
Yeah, let me do that. I'm hang on, I'm working on it.
So you're gonna knock us off, right, Teresa?
So I want you to, you can make me the person that ends it.
Okay.
Go find
Hang on.
Jessica here.
Let me get the guru here. Jessica, I need your help.
Well, all they had to do is leave the office.
Help.
Here's
Oh,
the
we-
question. The question, Mike, is were they cooperative?
Yes,
Did you have any problems with them?
didn't have any problems. I mean, the only issue we have is the same issue that we have every year, which is, I mean, certainly every year that you have a FEMA project, is that Teresa's busier than one on paper.
Right.
Whenever we have a year where you have a lot of FEMA work that she has to do, then she's overburdened at that point.
Yeah.
And so, and that's why, we're talking in February, because, it was far more important to them, and I understand completely, is to get the FEMA work done so that they can get the DSRs in so that you're that much closer to getting the cash back.
Mm-hmm.
So I think from an economic standpoint, that made perfect sense.
Someday we'll have FEMA behind us.
Well, every time they're behind you, you have another flood.
I know, I was thinking about that too.
You know, I just, you know, it seems like every so many years we have the 100-year flood.
Right. Yeah. They're becoming more prevalent, aren't they?
Yes. 100 years goes by a lot faster than I imagined.
They go a lot faster than they used to do.
Yeah. Well, okay, thank you very much, Mary Ann. Thank you.
Yep,
All right. Always a pleasure. And I'll see you next week.
Okay,
sounds
thanks.
great.
All right. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Bye, Robert.
Okay,
Good
bye,
meeting.
Mary Ann. Thanks.
Uh-huh.